Hola a todos, soy Javier Poveda y esto es de Bien TV, el canal en el que te lo vas a pasar de bien mientras aprendes geografía, historia e historia del arte. El vídeo de hoy va dirigido a mis alumnos de primero de la ESO de sección del IES Niel Armstrong de Valdemoro. Antes de empezar, como siempre, desearos que estéis todos muy bien de salud y que hayáis pasado una muy buena Semana Santa. A ver, que estoy preparando la presentación. Aquí está. So, today we are going to start the study of the climates and the landscapes, and we are going to start with the temperate climates and landscapes. In the following units, we will study the rest of the climates, the extreme climates, and the ones in Europe and Spain more deeply. So let's go to the presentation. Here it is, which is Unit 6, Temperate Climates and Landscapes. So let's begin with what is a landscape. So a landscape, en castellano un paisaje, the landscape of a place can be defined as the visible appearance of an area. Okay, so it is what we see in a territory. They are the product of nature and the changes made to them by people. They are a combination of both of them. And this is very important in geography, and we will see why. Depending on the degree of human intervention, the landscapes can be classified in two types. The first one are natural landscapes, which are a combination of relief, climate, weather, vegetation, and wildlife. It's a combination of all of these natural elements. These landscapes have not been affected by human activity. That's why they are natural. And then we have the opposite, which are the humanized landscapes. They are the result of human activity in the form of economic activities and technological developments. Here we have two photographs. On your left, you have a natural landscape, which is really easy to determine. And on your right, you have a humanized landscape. Why? Because, okay, we have a valley here and a river, which are natural elements, but it is very transformed, it is very affected by the human activity. For example, here in the hillside, we have a terrace farming, and we have here a road and some little buildings, etc. So climatic factors influence the appearance of a landscape. They affect a lot the shape of a landscape, and that is why in geography, landscapes are usually studied alongside the climate which is associated to them, so like pairs. And this is how we are going to study them. So the first climate we are going to study, the first temperate climate, is oceanic climate. The oceanic climate is located between the latitudes 40 degrees and 60 degrees in each hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, we find it on the west coast of Europe, here, and North America, here. Okay? I am pointing the locations with my mouse. In the southern hemisphere, it is located in the southern coast of Argentina and Chile, in South Africa here, and in the southeast of Australia, the island of Tasmania, which is this one, and New Zealand. So here we have two examples of climate graphs of oceanic climate in Dublin, Ireland, and in Wellington, New Zealand. So the oceanic climate zones are located on the coast, as we have seen. The winds from the west blow over the oceans and collect a lot of evaporated water, a lot of water vapor. Then, when they reach the land, this results in soft, which means not very abundant, and persistent, very regular all over the year, rainfall. Okay? It rains during all year long, more or less the same. Okay? It is a regular rainfall. The total annual rainfall range is between 700 and 1200 millimeters, and they have no arid months. Remember that in order to a month to be arid, the precipitation bar should be below the temperature line, and this does not happen in neither these climate graphs. So Therefore, they are wet or very wet climates. The ocean makes temperatures very mild, okay? And there is not much difference in temperature between seasons. The temperatures are not so low in winter and not so high in summer. So the thermal amplitude, this is a very important concept. The thermal amplitude is the difference between the highest and the lowest temperature, and it is narrow, it is small. For example, we are going to see what is the thermal amplitude in these climate graphs. The highest temperature in Dublin is in July, as I can see here, and it is around 18 degrees centigrade. And the lowest is in January and December, which is around 6 degrees centigrade. So we have it 18 and 6. So the thermal amplitude is 12, the difference between the lowest and the highest. 18, 6, the difference is 12, okay? So let's see how the natural oceanic landscapes look like. The rivers in the oceanic landscapes have regular and abundant flow. Remember that the flow of a river is the amount of water it carries. And it is regular and abundant flow all year because of the constant rain. If it is raining all year long, the flow is going to be high, it's going to be abundant and regular, okay? It is more or less the same during all the year. Regarding the vegetation, the mild temperatures and constant rain are good for deciduous forests. Deciduous forest means, in castellano, bosque de hoja caduca, such as, and the species we find in deciduous forest, the oak, el roble, the chestnut, el castaño, and the beech, el haya. These trees lose their leaves when it is cold at the end of autumn. Here you can see that these trees, this is an example of deciduous forest, and these trees are starting to lose their leaves because we can see the leaves in the ground. Okay? In areas with persistent fog, the high humidity and strong winds, we have thorny scrub vegetation. Thorny means it has thorns, espinas. Scrubs means maleza. This is a very small vegetation, and it is called shrubland, que en castellano sería matorral. Okay, shrubland, matorral. This is an example, this photograph of shrubland. And finally, when forests have been cut down, the meadows, los prados, appear due to humidity and mild temperatures. The meadows are huge extensions of grasslands, this is grass, which are optimal for providing natural food for livestock. Here we have some, this is sheep, yes, it's sheep. Okay, these are the three types of natural oceanic landscapes we can find. Then we have to take a look at the humanized oceanic landscapes, and they vary according to the degree of human occupation. In Western Europe, the Atlantic region is a very populated area with large cities. Here we have. The architecture reflects the influence of the rainy and windy weather. The roofs are sloped like this to avoid retaining rainwater. So when it rains, the water goes down to the ground. In these areas, pastures for livestock, not only one for livestock, and fields of corn and potatoes, maíz y patatas, have replaced many forests, like this. Very few people live on the west coast of North America and on southern Chile and Argentina, so there are very few humanized landscapes, and the forests are predominant in these regions. And finally, in Australia, Tasmania and New Zealand, the abundant grasslands provide ideal landscapes for cattle and sheep farming. Cattle is the cows, okay? Cows and sheep. In fact, those countries are the most important producers of cow and sheep products in the world. That's all for the oceanic climate, and now we are going to see the Mediterranean climate. This climate is found along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, which is obvious, In the coast of California, in the USA, in the west coast of the United States, in the central coast of Chile, here in South America, in this region of South Africa, and in the south and the southwest of Australia. Here you have two examples of climate graphs of the Mediterranean climate, Valencia and Naples in Italy. This Mediterranean climate has hot and dry summers due to the warm subtropical air that affects those regions. And the winters are mild because of the effect of the sea. You know, that soften the temperatures. As you can see here, the summers are very hot. Look at the temperatures goes really high, and they are dry. They have very few precipitations. The rainfall is very irregular. As you can see, it rains a lot in autumn and in spring than in summer. Okay, so we can find several arid months. Remember that an arid month it happens when the precipitations bar its height is below the line of temperatures. Okay, so for example, in Valencia we have May, June, July, and August are arid months. In Naples, June, July, and August are arid months. Why? Because the precipitations are below the red line of the temperatures. And in spring and mostly in autumn, the rains are plentiful. There are a lot of rain and often torrential. A torrential rain means that there are a lot of precipitations in a short period of time, very violent precipitations. Those are the torrential precipitations or rainfall. So let's go to the landscapes, and first we have the natural Mediterranean landscape. And we find that the rivers have low and irregular flow. Why is that? Because of the seasonal differences in rainfall, because it rains more in autumn than in summer, for example. So the flow is going to be lower in summer and it's going to be higher in autumn, for example. In summer, the rivers have very low water volumes or they are completely dry, what we call in Spain, una rambla, a soft basin, it's a rambla. And after a dry summer, the storms may cause flooding, inundaciones. Okay, this we can see this in the eastern coast of Spain, for example. The forests are made up of evergreen trees. Evergreen trees means that they do not lose their leaves. Okay, they have always leaves. That's why they call evergreen or always green. What species do we have? We have pines, pinos, holm oak, encinas, and cork oak, alcornoques. They are low, they are not very tall, and they have woody trunks, troncos, and woody, very thick trunks, and small and hard leaves covered with fuzz. Fuzz means pelusa or pelo, that protects from heat and prevents evaporation. Since in these climates we have a very few precipitation in the summer months, they need to keep the water, the trees need to keep the water, the most water they can, and that's why they have pardon, this type of leaves. On the ground, there is a lot of thorny scrub, okay, matorral espinoso. If logging, cutting trees, grazing the livestock, or fires cause the forest to disappear, we have dense thickets, arbustos, called maquis, in castellano maquia, this one, or garrigues, garriga, this one, that grow. Okay, these are the two types. It depends on the acidity of the soil, but we don't need to know that. Maquis and garrigues. Then we have to take a look at the Mediterranean humanized landscape. And we have to know that over the centuries, torrential rains have carried natural matter down to the coast and into deep valleys, forming plains. Okay, these plains are small in size, but they are very fertile, so therefore they are very suitable, adequadas, for agriculture. And the development of irrigation systems has led to intensive farming in this area. Here you have a good example. So the mild winters provide good conditions for rice, cotton, and citrus cultivation. In areas which are a bit far from the coast or away from the coast, the main crops that are cultivated are the so-called Mediterranean trilogy that we have to know, which is wheat, vines, and olive trees, trigo, vid y olivo. The Mediterranean region has also become, well, you have here two examples of olive trees and vines. I was saying that the Mediterranean region has also become a major tourist destination. Why? Because of its favorite climate, the attractive coastline, and the cultural heritage. Okay? In this region, we have the remains of the Roman Empire, as you know, and since the climate is so good for resting, we have a lot of tourist complexes. For example, here the hotels and the beach, and here that this is, I think, La Manga del Mar Menor. So it is very common to see this type of economic activities in the coast of the Mediterranean regions. Finally, we are going to see the third climate of this unit, which is the continental climate. The continental climate is found in the interior of Europe, Asia, and North America, in all of these regions, which are mostly far away from the oceans and the seas. Here we have two examples, one more time, of continental climate graphs. Okay, this is Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine, and Detroit, which is in the United States in this point here. So these inland areas do not receive the moderating influence of the seas. Remember that the seas affects the temperatures. So therefore the temperatures are very extreme, very hot in summer and very cold in winter. Therefore, the thermal amplitude is very wide. As you can see here, the line has a very it's a very big curve. Okay, for example, the thermal amplitude in Kiev, we have the lowest temperature is -6 degrees centigrade, and the highest is 20. So the thermal amplitude is a total of 26, which is a lot. Okay. The rainfall is not very abundant. Do not get confused with these bars because look at the values, that they are very low values, and occur mostly in summer, in the summer months, as you can see, and winters are usually dry. So let's go to the natural continental landscapes. We have that the rivers are fast flowing, they go whoosh fast, and with an abundant flow because they collect the water from many other rivers from the extensive, very large flat areas. We have enormous plains in these areas, and there are a lot of rivers that flow, and the main rivers collect the water from the smaller ones, so we have very wide and with a lot of flow rivers, okay? And they create large river basins, okay? The place where the river flows is the river basin. They are usually very large. You can see here this river. In the continental regions, we have two types of natural landscape. First, the coniferous forest, bosque de coníferas, which is called also taiga. In Spanish is the same. This is found in the northern areas which have the cooler summers, okay, which summers are the coolest. This taiga is made up of pine, pinos, fir, abetos, and birch trees, abedules. Then we have the steppe and the grassland. These are found south of the taiga when the temperatures in summer are higher and the rain is lower, okay? The steppe or the grasslands are vast, very enormous, vast plains of grass which have deep and fertile soil. So they are perfect for agriculture and to feed mostly the livestock. Here you got some cows and some bisontes, which I cannot remember right now the word in English. Let's continue with the continental humanized landscape. So we have talked about the taiga forest, which are generally very large. Here we have the taiga forest, and this is a taiga forest also. I didn't say it. And they are exploited for their wood. Okay, here you have this wood. This the most important industrial activity is logging. Okay. And this wood is used mostly for the paper manufacturing industry to make paper because of the cellulose that the wood has. The severe weather conditions and an inhospitable landscape means that the human population is small. It is difficult to live in these places. So the human population is small. There are not so many people living there. And they are concentrated in small towns and cities. The steppe regions are suitable for livestock and extensive grain farming. Here you have an enormous field of grain. This seems to be wheat or something similar. And here also, and because the fields are fertile and very flat in these areas, the machines can work the land. Here you have. The population is also small and concentrated in big towns, and the economic activity is primarily focused on the production and export of agricultural products. And now we're going to take a fast look to the European landscapes and the Spanish landscapes. We will study them more deeply in the next units, but we have to know more or less how they are distributed. So the Europe, which is a small, there's an S here. I have always typos in every presentation. I don't know why. It's because of the dictionary of the PowerPoint. Okay, so Europe is a small continent with no E. This is I don't know, I cannot change the dictionary of the PowerPoint, so it keeps translating the words in Spanish. Well, it has a great variety of natural landscapes because of three reasons. The latitude, which is mainly the temperate zone, except the northern part of Europe, which is a polar latitude. Remember that the latitude is the distance to the equator. The influence of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, because they create mild temperatures and cause heavy rains. And finally, the relief. The flatlands usually have higher rainfall. Here, okay, all this area, you remember the map exam, here this is the Great European Plain. However, the southern mountain ranges, these ones in brown, they shield, they protect the interior from the influence of the sea, okay, so they have a different vegetation. So what about the vegetation? We have that in the very north, the natural vegetation is the tundra. Further south, which is a little small vegetation. Further south, the coniferous forest or the taiga. In the rest of the continent with no E, much of the natural vegetation is deciduous forest, this one, mixed forest, which is a mix of deciduous and evergreen, Mediterranean forest, which is the evergreen forest, and the steppe, but some parts of it have disappeared due to intense human activity. Okay, the humans, they cut the trees and make the forest disappear. And in the high mountain regions, the vegetation varies according to the altitude and the location of each mountain range. There's not the same vegetation in the Pyrenees than in the Alps or in the Carpathian Mountains or the Caucasus. Okay, we will see it in the next units. Then we have to take a look at the natural landscapes of Spain. We have the following ones. We have the oceanic landscape in this region in blue, Galicia, and the coast of the next to the Cantabrian Sea. The vegetation is usually deciduous forest and shrubland. because it's an oceanic climate. Then we have the Mediterranean landscape here in orange, which affects the eastern coast of Spain, the southern coast, and the southwest of Spain. The natural vegetation here has almost disappeared, and we can only find some pines and garlic. In the southwest, in this region, there are large extension of corn oak trees, alcornoques, and this particular landscape, it is called dehesa. I haven't been able to find a word that corresponds to dehesa in English, so it is dehesa. Then we have the Mediterranean continental landscape, which is this region in light green, in which holm oak forest can be found on a very small scale because the dominant scape is the steppe. Then we have the subtropical Canarian landscape in the Canary Island, in which the vegetation is scarce and different in each island. And what is important here is that there are many endemic species. An endemic species is a species that only appears, exists, or grows in a specific territory and not in the rest of the world. For example, we have some species, some trees species in the Canary Islands that do not grow in the rest of the planet. For example, the Canary pines, El Pino Canario, or the dragos. The dragos are those trees which are very small and with a very thick trunk. And finally, we have the mountain landscape, which is mostly we have coniferous forest and natural meadows in high mountain areas. Sometimes I cannot find the words in English. So what do I want you to do in this unit? What tareas, what tasks? I want you to make these summary charts of climates. Why? Because it is easier for you to understand the climates, and we are going to need the characteristics of each of the climates for further activities. So it is important that you do summary charts is a tabla resumen of each of the climates we are going to study. Here is an example of how they should look like. We have to write what is the type of climate. This is an example of the Mediterranean climate, where we can find it, the locations, how are the temperatures, in which part of the year they are higher, in which part they are lower, what is the thermal amplitude, more or less, okay, in general, how the precipitations are, they are regular, irregular, they are abundant, they are scarce, at which part of the year they are the highest, which months are the ones with the less precipitations, etc, etc. How the natural landscapes look like and how the humanized landscapes look like. So for example, in natural landscapes, what is the vegetation, or in the humanized landscapes, what are the main economic activities, or how is the habitat, for example. And finally, an example of a climate chart. So I want you to copy in your notebook this one, the Mediterranean summary chart climate, the Mediterranean climate summary chart, and I want you to do this a summary chart of the oceanic and continental climate. Okay, this is the first half of your tasks for this week. And finally, the other activity we are going to realize, to elaborate in these months until the end of the course, is the interpretation of landscape pictures. Okay, why? Because one of the main objectives of the geography is the study and analysis of the landscapes, and the best resource for this purpose is the interpretation of a photography. So in order to make a proper interpretation of the picture or of a landscape photography, we need to follow these steps. First, observation. We can determine with a quick look at the photograph if the natural elements are predominant or if the human activities have changed the landscape. Usually in a landscape, a landscape, it is not 100% natural or 100% humanized, okay? Usually it is a mix. So you have to determine which one is heavier, no? which natural or humanized influence is heavier in the landscape, okay? So if the natural is predominant or if the humanized is predominant. Then the description. We have to identify and classify the elements on of the landscape depending upon it is a natural or humanized landscape, depending on the determination we have made in the previous step. So if it is a natural landscape, you should point out any relief feature, and if it is important, there's a river, there's a mountain, there's a valley. Any water course and its type, it's a river, it's a lake, it's an ocean, it's a sea. And finally, the predominant vegetation. Okay, if it's a mixed forest, evergreen forest, it's a shrubland, whatever. If there is any human element with no M, typos, like houses or roads or any building, you should point it out too. Then if we have determined that it is a humanized landscape, you should talk about the crops, the types of agriculture and livestock farming. For example, this is for cattle, for sheep, this is irrigation agriculture, this is a Mediterranean trilogy, for example. The buildings you can observe and its function, for example, houses or stock houses or factories or I don't know, hotels, whatever, okay? The buildings you find and what are they used for. And also the infrastructures such as reservoirs, roads, bridges, highways, whatever you see. And finally, you must indicate the remains of natural landscapes if they exist, okay? They can exist or not in the photography. And finally, we have to make an analysis. You have to identify the economic activities that take place in this landscape: agriculture, industry, mining, livestock farming, no activity at all. How the population is distributed, if it is dispersed, like small populations are far from each other, or it's a concentrated habitat, for example, a city. And finally, the climate that has given rise to another typo that has given rise to the landscape. Okay, so because of these economic activities and this vegetation and these buildings and this economic activity, so we can tell that the climate is oceanic or it is Mediterranean. You have always to justify your answer, okay? You can't just say, this is Mediterranean. Okay, but why? Okay, that's why we have to make a description and an analysis. So let's go with an example. Imagine I give you this picture here and of this landscape. So let's follow the steps. First, observation. So with a quick look, we can see that this is a natural predominant landscape, even though there are some human elements such as the meadows here, los prados, and this little town here, but the predominant features are natural. Okay, we have this mountain range and these hills and they say these forests. Okay, so it is predominantly natural but with some humanized elements. Then the description. We have a mountainous area, more or less high, we can deduct. We can see a valley here and the top of the mountains which are covered with snow. The vegetation in the areas which have not been replaced by the meadows, for example these forests here, they look like to be, or they seem to be deciduous forests, okay? They look like oaks, if I am correct. I don't know. I cannot see it very precisely. We cannot see any water course here. There are no rivers or something similar, or at least, or they may be, but we cannot appreciate them. We cannot see them, I mean. And this landscape includes some human elements. For example, the town here and the church here. And also, well, this is in the foreground, primer plano, and the numerous meadows which are enclosed. They are surrounded by fences, so they are humanized. And the meadows are used for livestock to graze, to eat grass. We can notice also some roads, for example here and this one here that goes through the valley, the roads to communicate the town with others nearby. Here, for example, it might be another town, but I cannot be sure about it. So that's the description of what we see. Then we go to the analysis. We can deduct that the main economic activity seems to be livestock farming because of the meadows we can see. There are no signs of other activities such as mining or industrial activity. The town is made up of a few houses, therefore a few people live there, and it is dispersed habitat. Why? Because the nearest towns seems to be located higher up on the valley, if this is a town. The climate in which we can find this type of landscape seems to be the oceanic. Well, it's the oceanic, so this climate or this landscape, it is oceanic, in fact, where the mild temperatures all year long and persistent rainfall form as typical landscape the deciduous forest and the meadows. This is what we studied for the oceanic climate, so if we see deciduous forest and meadows, we know that this is an oceanic landscape. And finally, the higher areas might have a mountain climate because we can see snow at the top of the mountain range. We will study the mountain climate in the following units, okay? So remember to justify your answers in the analysis. So finally, I want you to follow these steps, but for these two photographies, okay? For this photography on your left and for this one on your right. They are separate landscapes, okay? So those are your tasks for this week, to make the summary charts of the three climates and to comment or to make an interpretation of these two landscape photographies. And that's it for Unit 6. So let's make some magic here. Okay, so this is it for Unit 6, and in the following units we will study the extreme climates and the landscapes of Europe and Spain. Espero que este vídeo os haya ayudado a comprender un poquito mejor el tema y si tenéis cualquier duda ya sabéis que podéis escribirme para lo que sea. Un saludo, muchas gracias por ver el vídeo y nos vemos en la próxima clase.